We need fresher perspectives who will work for 60% of your compensation package, he informed me coldly from behind his minimalist oak desk. You're simply too expensive for our new direction. My name is Michael Donovan, 52 years old, Executive Director of Strategic Partnerships at Pinnacle Solutions in Austin, Texas. 17 years of cultivating their business network from nothing, and it concluded with a 10-minute conversation on a Wednesday morning. I'd anticipated it for months. Ever since Ethan Reed took over as Executive Director, there had been murmurings about streamlining, digital transformation, optimization of resources, all the corporate euphemisms. That typically means someone with experience is about to be replaced. Ethan was 36, wore designer suits that probably cost more than my monthly mortgage payment, and discussed innovation ecosystems like they were something you could order at a trendy restaurant. During presentations, he'd observe me with a particular expression, not hostility, just restlessness. As if I were a landline in a conference room of smartphones. Something functional but outdated. The industry landscape is shifting, he continued, barely glancing up from my personnel file. We need people who understand digital engagement metrics and social commerce strategies. I'm sure you understand. I did understand. I just disagreed profoundly. I built relationships with our premium clients through countless conversations, innumerable in-person meetings, and 17 years of resolving challenges that no algorithm could address. When Robert from Meridian Manufacturing faced production delays that threatened his entire operation, I restructured his payment schedule over a holiday weekend. When Eleanor from North Star Holdings lost her sister, I personally delivered the contract renewal so she wouldn't have to worry about business amid her grief. But Ethan wasn't interested in these stories. He was looking at my salary and seeing a figure that could be reduced significantly with a younger replacement. I completely understand, I said and shook his hand firmly. He seemed relieved by my composure, even thanked me for my professionalism as I packed my office that afternoon. Sarah from finance stopped by. She'd been there nearly as long as I had. Are you all right? She asked, lingering in the doorway. I'm fine, I said, and genuinely meant it. They have no idea what they're doing, she whispered, checking the hallway. Ethan's convinced the executive team he's some kind of visionary. I just nodded and continued emptying my desk. What neither of them realized was that I wasn't upset. I was already strategizing 3 moves ahead, because while Ethan was scrutinizing spreadsheets, I was recalling direct numbers and commitments and 17 years of clients who didn't call Pinnacle Solutions. They called me. I joined Pinnacle when it was still called Southwestern Business Consultants. For employees, a cramped office with no windows and more ambition than actual clients. Back then, Richard Hayes ran the operation. A veteran consultant with the conviction that business was built on relationships, not just transactions. People sign agreements with people, he'd tell me, not with corporate entities. Never forget that. I remembered. For 17 years, I lived by those words. I was the first person clients contacted with problems and the last person they spoke to before signing renewals. My personal phone contained more direct numbers than the company directory. My marriage had suffered for this dedication. Christine and I divorced 10 years ago, partly because I'd prioritized Pinnacle's growth over our relationship. My daughter Olivia spent her adolescence seeing me primarily on weekends and holidays. Now, at 25, she understood better. She was actually the first person I called after the meeting with Ethan. They did what? Her indignation was immediate. It's just business, I said, driving home with my office belongings in a single box. The new director wants his own team. After everything you've done for them, that's just wrong, Dad. She wasn't incorrect. But I wasn't interested in being right. I was interested in what happened next. The warning signs had been appearing for months. Richard had retired last year, selling his controlling interest to investors who promised to preserve the company culture. 6 months later, Ethan arrived with his presentations and his MBA vocabulary. Suddenly, our quarterly meetings were filled with terms like customer acquisition cost and engagement optimization. Nobody mentioned relationships anymore. 3 weeks ago, I'd walked past the conference room and overheard Ethan speaking with someone from Human Resources. The legacy personnel compensation is significantly misaligned with market standards, he was saying, especially in strategic partnerships. Legacy personnel. That's what I'd become, an antiquated asset. I'd returned to my office and opened my contact list. Not the company CRM, My personal records, names, numbers, 17 years of notes about families, anniversaries, vacation homes, favorite restaurants. Information you couldn't extract from any database. Then I'd made a call to Martin Chin, a former colleague who'd departed 6 years earlier to join a competing firm. We'd maintained contact, meeting for lunch occasionally. "How's Callaway Partners treating you?" I asked casually. "Growing steadily," he'd said. "Actually, we were just discussing expanding the Strategic Partnerships division." I remembered smiling. "That's good to know." The day Ethan finally summoned me to his office, I already had Martin's offer letter in my email. 3 days after being dismissed, I sat in my car outside Highland Country Club watching Ethan arrive for his 1:30 p.m. tea time. He was meeting with Robert from Meridian Manufacturing, my largest client for the past decade. From my vehicle, I could see them greeting each other, Ethan's animated gestures, Robert's cordial but reserved smile. That's when it truly registered. Ethan wasn't just replacing me. He was trying to step into my role. He thought client relationships could be transferred like digital files. Meeting by meeting, handshake by handshake. He was planning to insert himself into the connections I'd spent 17 years cultivating. I watched them walk toward the first tee, and something settled within me. Not anger, clarity. I started my car and drove directly to Callaway Partners' downtown office. Martin met me in the reception area, surprised by my appearance. "I thought you were taking a few days to consider our offer," he said. "I'm done considering," I replied, "but I want to adjust the terms." In the conference room, I outlined what I needed: complete autonomy over client integration, my own team structure, and most importantly, no non-compete enforcement against my former clients. Martin listened, then invited Victoria Callaway herself. "You're essentially asking to bring your client portfolio with you," she said after I'd explained my strategy. "I'm not taking anything that isn't already mine," I responded. "These relationships exist because of 17 years of work. The contracts might belong to Pinnacle, but the trust belongs to me." Victoria studied me thoughtfully, then nodded. "Make it happen. And your terms are accepted." That evening, I sat at my dining table with a notepad and my phone. I didn't feel vengeful. I felt purposeful. This wasn't about retribution. It was about respect for the work I'd done and the commitments I'd kept. Olivia called while I was making my list. "How are you doing, Dad?" "Really?" I considered it. "Better than expected," I told her. "Sometimes you need to be pushed out to recognize where you truly belong." "So what's next?" "I'm starting over." I looked down at my notes, 12 names circled on the page, but not from zero. After we hung up, I opened my laptop and began drafting emails. Not to clients, but to their assistants, the people who actually controlled access. People I'd always treated with the same respect as the executives they supported. "Would you let them know I've moved to a new position?" I'd appreciate an opportunity to update them personally. No pressure. No sales pitch. Just the truth. By midnight, I had responses from 9 of them, all conveying the same message: they want to hear from you. I closed my laptop and slept more soundly than I had in months. Tomorrow would be day 1 of showing Ethan exactly what he'd discarded. My first call was to Robert at Meridian Manufacturing. No assistant screening, direct to his mobile. "Michael," he said, sounding genuinely pleased. "I was wondering when I'd hear from you. Had a golf meeting with your replacement yesterday. Spent 4 hours listening to him talk about customer-centric digital strategies and not once asking about my son's college graduation. That's why I'm calling," I said. "I've moved to Callaway Partners, but this isn't a sales call, Robert. If you're satisfied with Pinnacle, that's all that matters to me." The silence lasted only a moment. "Send me the paperwork," he said. "We follow you." By the end of the week, I'd had similar conversations with 6 other clients. No hard sell, just honesty. I was somewhere new. They could come if they wanted to. They all wanted to. It was Eleanor from North Star Holdings who warned me first. "Your former company called yesterday," she said. "Some aggressive young man named Ethan said you were in breach of contract, that the clients couldn't legally follow you." I thanked her and immediately called Martin. He connected me with Callaway's legal team, who confirmed what I already suspected. Ethan was bluffing. My employment contract had a non-solicitation clause, but nothing that prevented clients from choosing to follow me on their own initiative. "As long as you're not actively poaching, you're in the clear," the lawyer assured me. The next morning, I arrived at my new office to find an email from Ethan. The subject line read, "Cease and desist." The message contained what you'd expect: threats of litigation, accusations of client interference, demands that I return all proprietary client information immediately. It concluded with an offer to discuss settlement terms before further escalation. I printed it out and handed it to Martin. "He's panicking," Martin said with a slight smile. "The board must be asking questions." "He doesn't understand what's happening," I replied. "He thinks I stole something." That afternoon, my phone rang. It was Sarah from accounting. "Full meltdown mode," she whispered. "Ethan has been in meetings with the board all day. They're talking about client retention bonuses, emergency outreach programs. He told them you hacked the CRM. I had to laugh at that. I've never even logged into the CRM. You know that?" "I know. That's why I'm calling. They're bringing in an outside firm to audit the system activity. When they don't find anything, they'll have to admit I didn't steal anything," I finished for her. "Exactly. But Michael, be careful. Ethan's scared. He promised the board he could reduce costs without losing clients. Now he's lost 7 in a week." After hanging up, I called Victoria Calloway and updated her. She wasn't concerned about the legal threats, but she was impressed by the client transfers. 7 major accounts in 5 days, she said, without a single sales presentation. "I've never seen anything like it." "It's not about sales," I told her. "It's about trust." Just as I was leaving for the day, my phone buzzed with a text from a number I didn't recognize. "This is Ethan Reed. We should talk in person. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. at Copper Bean downtown. This doesn't need to get uglier." I showed it to Martin, who immediately advised against meeting. "He's desperate. Don't give him any leverage." But I disagreed. I want to hear what he has to say. The next morning, I arrived at Copper Bean 15 minutes early and selected a table in the corner with a clear view of the entrance. Ethan walked in at 8:10, scanning the cafe until he spotted me. His confident stride couldn't disguise the tension in his shoulders. "Thanks for coming," he said, sliding into the chair opposite. "I think we got off on the wrong foot." I didn't respond. "Just wait. Look," he continued, leaning forward. "What would it take to stop this client exodus? The board is breathing down my neck. Whatever Calloway is paying you, we can match it, plus a signing bonus." And just like that, I knew I had him exactly where I needed him. "I'm not interested in returning," I said simply. Ethan's professional smile faltered. "Then what do you want? A consulting arrangement? Finder's fees for the accounts you're taking." I took a slow sip of my coffee. "You still don't understand, do you? This isn't about money." "Everything's about money," he replied with absolute certainty. "That's why you're losing." I set my cup down. Those clients aren't following me because I offered better rates or more innovative service packages. They're following me because for 17 years, I answered their calls on Sunday evenings. I remembered their children's names. I treated them like human beings, not accounts. Ethan's expression hardened. "Very touching. But let's be practical. Name your price to stop poaching our client list." "I haven't poached anyone. I haven't breached any contracts. I simply let people know where I landed, and they made their own decisions." He leaned back, studying me. "The board isn't happy. They brought me in to modernize operations, streamline expenses, and not lose millions in accounts overnight." "And who did they blame when you told them?" I asked. His slight flinch told me everything. "That's not relevant." "It is to me." I leaned forward, "because I'm guessing you didn't tell them the truth. That you dismissed the person responsible for maintaining those relationships without understanding what that meant. That you viewed my salary as an expense instead of an investment." Ethan's jaw tightened. "They understand necessary restructuring comes with temporary disruption. Is that what you call losing 35% of your revenue base in a week? Temporary disruption?" That hit home. His eyes widened slightly. 35%? It's 7 clients. 7 clients who represent over a third of Pinnacle's annual billing, I clarified. "But you wouldn't know that, would you? Because you were examining salary spreadsheets, not client value reports." The color drained from his face. I knew then that he'd been selectively reporting the damage to the board. "How many more are at risk?" he asked, his voice lower. "All of them," I said honestly. "Every major client I handled for 17 years has reached out. I haven't even had to make the calls." He stared at me for a long moment. "What happens if I go back to the board and tell them you've been actively soliciting our clients, that you took proprietary information?" "Then you'd be lying," I replied calmly, "and your IT audit will prove it. I didn't take a single document, download a single file, or breach a single confidence. The only thing I took was 17 years of relationships that I built personally. You can't threaten me with falsehoods, Ethan. He drew back as if I'd slapped him. How did you know about the IT audit? I just smiled. People talk to people they trust. That's another thing you don't understand about this business. Ethan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and something in his expression changed. A flash of panic quickly suppressed. I need to take this, he said, standing abruptly. We're not finished. But as I watched him hurry outside to take the call, I knew we were. Whatever was happening at Pinnacle was accelerating faster than he could control. Later that afternoon, Martin stopped by my office with a puzzled expression. You just got a call from Richard Hayes, he said. Isn't that your former boss? The one who retired. Former boss and former owner, I corrected him. Did he leave a number? Said you'd have it. Also said, and I'm quoting here, the board called an emergency meeting. They want to talk to you yesterday. I nodded, unsurprised. Thank you. After Martin left, I sat back in my chair, considering my next move. The pieces were falling into place faster than I had anticipated. Richard wouldn't have called unless something significant was happening. I picked up my phone and dialed his number from memory. They're in full panic, Richard said without preamble when he answered. When the board realized exactly which clients had left, they called me to ask what the hell was happening. I leaned back in my chair. And what did you tell them? The truth. That the reason Pinnacle has had such a stable client base was because of you. That you were worth every penny they paid you, and then some. I appreciate that, Richard. It's not about appreciation, he grumbled. It's about 17 years of work being dismantled by some kid who thinks business runs on algorithms. The board wants an emergency session. They're asking if you'd consider coming back. I wasn't surprised, but it wasn't what I wanted. I'm established at Callaway now, with 7 of our biggest clients. Soon to be 10, Richard noted dryly. 3 more are finalizing their paperwork this week, I admitted. A low whistle came through the phone. No wonder they're panicking. That's 48% of Pinnacle's annual revenue. 52%, I corrected him. The line went quiet for a moment. You always did know everyone's numbers better than they did themselves, Richard finally said. So what's your strategy here, Michael? Because the board is prepared to offer you Ethan's position to stop the bleeding. It was tempting for about 5 seconds. Then I remembered Ethan's dismissive tone, the way he'd barely looked at me during our final meeting. How quickly 17 years of loyalty had been reduced to a line item on a cost-cutting spreadsheet. I'm not interested in his position, I said. But I am interested in something else. Name it. A partnership arrangement. Callaway and Pinnacle shared client services for accounts that would benefit from both firms' specialties. Richard was silent for a moment, processing. You want the board to authorize a partnership with the company that's currently gutting their client list? I want them to recognize reality, I corrected. At the current rate, Pinnacle won't have enough major clients left to sustain operations. But a partnership would stabilize both companies. My clients get the best of both worlds. Pinnacle keeps partial revenue instead of losing it entirely. And Callaway gains market share without a protracted battle. And Ethan, that's the board's decision, I said, though we both knew what would happen. I have no interest in his future. My only concern is for the clients and the employees who've been caught in the middle of his restructuring. Richard chuckled. You always were better at the strategic game than anyone gave you credit for. I'll present it to the board tomorrow, 9 a.m. sharp. After hanging up, I called Victoria Callaway to my office and outlined the proposal. She listened attentively, occasionally jotting notes. This is surprisingly generous, she said when I finished. We could just wait another month and acquire the remaining clients when Pinnacle collapses. We could, I agreed, but that would harm a lot of good people who work there. This way both companies benefit, the clients receive optimal service, and nobody loses their livelihood because of one man's short-sighted decisions. Victoria studied me for a long moment, then nodded. You really aren't doing this for revenge. Revenge is unproductive, I said. I'm interested in building something better. The next morning, my phone rang at 9:45. Approved, Richard said simply, calling from the board meeting. Full partnership agreement pending legal review. And Ethan has been asked to tender his resignation, effective immediately. And the employees? No further restructuring, he confirmed. The board admitted they got too caught up in Ethan's vision of cost reduction. They forgot what actually drives this business. I thanked him and hung up, feeling a weight lift that I hadn't even realized I'd been carrying. It wasn't about winning. It wasn't about revenge. It was about setting things right. Victoria appeared in my doorway, eyebrows raised questioningly. "We have a deal," I told her. "Now we build something better than either company could have achieved alone." She smiled. All because they underestimated the quiet man who just nodded and walked away. 6 weeks later, I stood at the podium in Callaway's conference room, facing a crowd of familiar faces. Clients from both companies, board members, staff. The partnership announcement was being formalized today. Ethan wasn't present, naturally. Last I'd heard, he'd accepted a position with a startup in Houston where his cost-cutting approach might actually be appropriate. "Today marks the beginning of something unique in our industry," I said, looking across the assembled faces. "Not a merger, not an acquisition. A true partnership built on the understanding that business relationships are created by people, not spreadsheets." From the back of the room, I spotted Richard grinning proudly. Beside him stood Sarah and several other Pinnacle employees who'd been concerned about their futures just weeks earlier. The partnership agreement was elegant in its simplicity. Clients could select which company would be their primary service provider, but would have access to the specialized services of both. Revenue would be shared based on service utilization, and most importantly, the strategic partnerships teams from both companies would be unified under my leadership. After the formal announcement, Robert from Meridian Manufacturing approached me, shaking his head in amazement. "When you left Pinnacle, I was ready to follow you anywhere," he said. "But this is even better. You turned getting fired into the best possible outcome for everyone, except the person who fired you." Eleanor from Northstar joined us, nodding in agreement. "That young man never understood what he was discarding," she said. "But we did." As the event concluded, Victoria Callaway found me by the windows overlooking the city. "The board is calling it a masterful strategy," she said. "In 6 weeks, you've transformed both companies and secured client loyalty that should last for years." I shook my head. I just reminded everyone of something they already knew. Business isn't built on cost-cutting. It's built on relationships. "And revenge?" she asked with a slight smile. "Was that part of it?" "The best revenge wasn't taking the clients," I replied, looking out over Austin. "It was showing everyone the right way to keep them." 1 month after the partnership announcement, I left the office early to meet Olivia for dinner. She'd been following the entire story with a mixture of pride and amazement. "So technically, you're now more influential than you were before," she said as we settled into our table at the restaurant. I shrugged. "It's not about influence. It's about doing things the right way." "Still," she persisted, "the guy who fired you is gone. You've essentially got 2 companies answering to you now, and all your clients think you're some kind of business genius." "I'm just a person who answers his phone on weekends," I said, smiling. After dinner, I drove home to my quiet house, reflecting on the journey of the past few months, from being unceremoniously dismissed to reshaping an entire sector of Austin's business landscape. It had never been about getting back at Ethan. It had been about proving that what I'd built over 17 years had real, enduring value. The next morning, I arrived at my office to find a small package on my desk. Inside was a framed photograph of the original Southwestern Business Consultants team, just Richard, myself, and 2 others standing in front of that tiny first office 17 years ago. The note with it read simply, "People sign agreements with people. Never forget that. Richard." I placed the frame on my desk where clients would see it when they visited. A reminder of where it all began and why it mattered. Later that day, I had back-to-back meetings with clients from both Pinnacle and Callaway. Not crisis management, not damage control. Just the regular relationship-building conversations that had been my specialty for 17 years. As I picked up the phone to make my first call, I felt something I hadn't experienced in a long time. Pure satisfaction. Not from winning a corporate battle, but from knowing that conducting business the right way, the human way, still mattered in the end. Ethan had done me a favor by trying to replace me with someone cheaper. He'd proven just how valuable I really was, and that was a lesson worth every moment of the journey.